Welcome, everyone. We will be getting started in just a moment. Thank you all for being here. And as some of you may know, we have Congresswoman Jahana Hayes joining us to kick off today's event. So she'll be on shortly and we will get started. Yikes.
Hi, everyone, please stand by. We'll begin momentarily. This is very exciting. We're told the Congresswoman is just walking into our office and is logging in momentarily.
And I believe she just joined. Let's see here. Hello, Congresswoman. Oh, let's see, you're muted.
Yes, I was muted. How are you?
Hi, great. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, this is crazy. Literally, they're about to call votes in like 5 minutes. So
oh, okay.
I'm
So
happy.
we will be, yeah, we'll be super, super quick. So I just want to quickly say thanks to everyone for joining us for our Listen, Learn, Act conversation series. Today's panelist conversation is titled, What's Next? Post-Election Racial Healing. And at LiveGirl, we believe that conversation is the catalyst for change, and we're so thrilled to have you all joining us for what I'm sure will be an enlightening conversation. So we'll get into it. And again, I'm so honored to announce that we have US Congresswoman Jahana Hayes joining us to kick us off. She is the US representative for the 5th Congressional District of Connecticut, and she was elected to the United States House of Representatives in November 2018, making her the first African-American woman and the first African-American Democrat to ever represent the state of Connecticut in Congress. So with that, we will turn it over to you. We're so grateful for your leadership, for your advocacy of racial equality, and yeah, take it away.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks so much for doing this. I have to be honest, I still get chills every time I hear someone say that, because it is such a humbling existence to know that I am the first African-American woman, first African-American Democrat to ever represent the state of Connecticut, which in and of itself is crazy. But it really has taught me some valuable lessons that I hope that I can pass on. And that is, even if you've never seen it before, we have the ability to create our own footprint. Had I waited for someone else to show me how this was supposed to look or what I was supposed to do, I would still be waiting. So, sometimes you just have to step out on faith, step out on courage, step out on the history of our ancestors, and know that we already have everything that we need to do so many of these things. I just love the fact that you guys are pulling this together, because you will lead the next generation. It is your voice, it is your creativity, it is your talent that is so necessary, so critically important, and it is what is missing. So I tell you to be bold and be fearless. I know when I saw that Akia Callum was associated with this, all day long, I was like, whatever it is, I'm in, because she brings her A game every time, and just the energy and the spirit and the motivation and the will to work for what is important. Throughout my time in Congress, literally my perspective has been so incredibly important, because I see everything through an equity lens, whether we are talking about, childcare or education or nutrition or food security or the economy. I look at everything through a lens of equity. And when you filter that down one more layer, we end up with a lens of racial equity. And I have had to, first of all, teach people how to treat me and help people understand my experiences. I try to leave room for the fact that people just don't know, which is getting really old and really tired, because at some point people just ought to know. But we have a unique opportunity to educate people on the disparities, on the differences, on what is missing. I think this pandemic has really revealed so many things in a much larger context, things that we've already known, but now there is a mandate to address these challenges, to close those gaps. So I am just so incredibly godly proud of all of you for coming together, for having these conversations, for forcing those conversations. And I would say to you, make it your business to hold your elected officials accountable. So much goes undone, unchecked, but it is, when we talk about majority and minority, the majority is the people. The majority is you. And if you have a leader who does not reflect your values, if you have someone who is not bringing your voice and your concerns and closing those equity gaps in an intentional and purposeful way, then they shouldn't be allowed to keep these jobs, whether it is at the federal level, the state level, the local level. There is a mandate out there. The people have spoken, and they have said very clearly what is important and what it is they're looking for. Do not let that be the end of the conversation. Do not let it just be a list of demands with no follow through. We have to make sure that not only are we articulating our needs, but also following up to make sure that those needs are met. I encourage you. I'm so sorry I can't stay for the panel. We are literally right at the point where voting is about to happen. But I will say, one of the things that I'm most proud of in this space is that I have been able to not only open this door, but then hold it open for other people. In the last Congress, I brought a group of NAACP youth to the Congressional Black Caucus Legislative Conference. I have continued to have internships in my office that are paid internships, because I want to create opportunities for people who otherwise would not be able to have those opportunities. If I'm here, you're here. So we're ironing out the details in this pandemic of what our winter and spring internships will look like. But please, I encourage anyone on this event who is a high school or a college student and looking for an internship, looking just to network and really gain that valuable experience, let me be a vessel for you. Let me use my agency and my advocacy to uplift you, and then we can continue to multiply those opportunities in our community. When I came into this role, I had so many people reach out. I have a friend of a friend, or my law partner wants to do his child wants to do an internship on the Hill. And I look at it as these are people who would have already had those opportunities. I want to open the door for people who, but for the fact that I am there, would never have had this experience. So please help me do that. Allow me to do that. Join me in this work, and just thank you so much for everything that you are doing. And please invite me back.
Oh, we'll hold you to that. We'd love to have you back.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I have to go vote, but I so appreciate you all and the work that you are doing. And I look forward to anything that I can do to joining you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
Best
you.
of luck. Have a great evening.
Oh.
Bye-bye.
Hey, I'm getting in trouble.
So much.
Take care.
Great. Thank you, Congresswoman. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Taylor, who is our equity and inclusion intern here at LiveGirl. So.
Hi ladies, my name is Kelly again, and today we have an amazing panelist as well as a moderator. To start off, we have amazing Akila S. Cullum, who is the Director of the Community Impact and Marketing at Bridge to Success Community Partnership and President of the Connecticut State Conference NAACP Youth and College Division. We have April Harvin, who is Behavioral Health Professional and Administrator, Psychotherapist, Coach, Staff Developer, and Consultant. And then for our moderator, we have the lovely Ms. Fatou Niang, who's the founder of S.T.A.R, Stand Against Racism.
Well, thank you, Kelly, for this wonderful introduction. And this was an amazing moment to have Congresswoman Joanna Hayes join us. And it's excellent and perfect timing for our new conversation. So, Akia and April, will you quickly want to share something with the audience about yourself before we start grilling you with questions?
Sure. My name is Akia S. Cullum, as Kelly stated. I am the Director of Community Impact and Marketing for Waterbury Bridge Success Community Partnership, which is a small nonprofit in Waterbury, Connecticut that focuses on racial equity within education. We have 4 areas of work that we focus on. We have early career and education, we have positive youth development, college and career pathways, and we have family engagement. We also have 2 think tanks. So we have Equity Matters, and we have our youth advisory think tank, which is now called Let Youth Lead. They renamed themselves, so that was created in 2019. As Kelly also said, I also serve as a president of Connecticut State Conference NAACP Youth and College Division, overseeing about 13 years across the state of Connecticut. And I'm also the chair of National Initiatives and Development for NAACP National Youth Works Committee. Honored and privileged to be here with you all. I am 23 years old, so I'm not that far removed from you all. I know there's a lot that I have accomplished, and hopefully you all will be able to accomplish in small but big ways as well. I recently graduated with my master's in education in 2020 from Post University. I got my legal studies degree in 2018, December 2018, from Post University as well. So I am a double grad, and I'm currently at Yale Access law school program. I'm getting ready to go to law school in 2022. So I think that covers a little bit about me. I do want to learn a little bit more about you guys. So hopefully you'll be able to drop some gems in the chat so we could have an interactive conversation. But I'll turn it over to April for her to introduce herself as well.
Thank you, Akia. And they say if you want to get something done, go to a busy person. So you are the go-to person. I'm sitting here like in awe of all you've done. So thank you for sharing that. My name is April Harvin. I am a social worker. It's my first, I guess, professional identity, licensed clinical social worker. And I've worked in many organizations, and I've worked with children, youth, substance abuse, mental health, even the criminal justice system. And one of the things I kept seeing as a constant was the overrepresentation of people who look like me, and organizations that were run by people who didn't look like me, and systems that were controlled by people who didn't look like me. And I took a training in undoing racism, which is done by the People's Institute. You're familiar, right? And that opened my eyes probably a decade and a half ago. I'm a little bit more removed than Akia from where a lot of people are, but my belief is that we all need to walk this journey together, all the generations sharing and learning from each other, not just the older, quote unquote, I'm still quote unquote, generation teaching younger, but that we all bring our experience, strength, and hope and our lived experience to do this, because that's what our ancestors did. But when I learned really what racism was about, because I thought I knew it. I'm a Black woman. I grew up in America. I thought I had my PhD in racism. Well, now I have a postdoc, because now I better understand not only the impact on me, but a deeper impact, and how to address it, look at it, and begin to change it. And as the People's Institute say, undoing. Not that it's going to happen today or tomorrow, but we need to continue to undo, because 400 years ago, our ancestors who were in chains probably didn't know when they were going to be free, and that it was going to be about another 250 years, but they knew it would happen. And we have to have that same vision. We will undo this. And each day we do work towards it brings us closer to when it's undone. So thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thank you, both of you. Those were excellent. And indeed, you both are very busy and very impressive and accomplished. So thank you for being here with us. Well, the first question would be, how can our communities or nation come together for racial healing?
So I think that question was very key. I think about doing self-work or shadow work and making sure that you're internally taken care of. I always tell my youth and college folks that you can't take care of other people unless you take care of yourself. And I think that's very important for us to note and highlight and uplift, especially in the midst of a global pandemic. I think after all that has transpired within the last 9 months, both the death of Black lives on and the genocide of Black people within the last couple of months, but even before that time period, I think it's just been heightened by the fact that we're inside. And then coronavirus, which has further inundated Black and brown families. I think, once again, centering ourselves. And that centering of ourselves also includes reading, right? Like, we're talking about educating ourselves on what's going on, undoing racism, as Ms. April stated as well, where we now have the opportunity where Google's at our fingertips. You have access to Siri and Alexa and asking questions on what's going on. So ask those questions, ask those critical questions that you might not want to ask a person of color or a Black or brown person, because you might be scared or skeptical. Be like, I don't know if it's going to be offensive to you. But also have those prerequisites, right? Like, I've been thinking about this for a long period of time. I'm asking you to help assist me, but also don't put the burden on Black and brown people to help you through that journey as well. I'm tired and I'm exhausted. And talking about race every day, 7 days a week is tiring, especially when you have your own lives to try to cope with. So I think racial healing really starts at the root. Like, why am I seeking? One, why does racism exist? And then two, why am I feeling these feelings when, like, I look or I talk to a Black or brown person, or like, why are they feeling the type of way that they're feeling? Why are people still protesting 400 years later about the same things that our ancestors been talking about for a long period of time? Like, this makes no sense. We're in 2020. We just had a conversation about the fact that Jahana Hayes was the first Congresswoman, right, in 2018 to get elected from Connecticut. That's nuts. That was 2 years ago. So how are we taking up space, but how are we also making opportunities for Black and brown people to step into these spaces that, no, we don't necessarily have to fit into a box of diversity, equity, inclusion. We do other things outside of that. As you heard in my bio or my short bio, I got my master's in education. I got my bachelor's degree in legal studies, but I'm doing communications. Like, none of them none of those things correlate. So don't fit people into a box. Do the self work, and then also figure out how you could now lean on your community and support your community as well, and bring them in, because I think we don't necessarily recognize the intersectionality between everything. And I don't have to come in and say, oh, like Black Lives Matter, or disregard other people's lives. I'm saying Black Lives Matter because we're trying to uphold and uplift those folks because they've been further marginalized.
Well, there's so much yes, thank you. There's so much you touched on, and I want to just maybe expand on a couple of things. I like when you say read, because what's happened so often is that we are so unaware of history, and we think about race as just the interpersonal, whether someone who looks like me is treated well by someone who may be white or white identified. And it's the interpersonal is one of the aspects, but to understand it's systemic, it's structural, and it was intentional, and that it was created. I mean, not much like what Hannah Nicole Jones in 1619, is that this country was built on slavery, and racism was used to justify slavery and to maintain slavery and to maintain the privileged position of white people. Now, if you understand it systemically and not only think of it as interpersonally, or people are good or bad, the system is not good, but the people are not good or bad. Healing can begin because those who benefit from the system can begin to undo it without having to take personal responsibility in terms of I've never owned or my family never owned, but I know I've benefited in this system and I've internalized some of those beliefs, which is why sometimes I'm willing to think one way of people of color who I've never met, but think another way of the people of color I have met. And so not just sticking in the interpersonal, but the interpersonal is important, and we need to do our own healing. We all need to heal from how we've internalized racial oppression, and particularly people of color need to understand and heal from what has happened to us, as Dr. Joy DeGruy would say, not what's wrong with us, but what has happened to us and how we've adjusted or adapted or been impacted by it. And healing has to also start with truth before there can be reconciliation. And if we're not able to tell the truth, to know the truth, to accept the truth, healing can't begin. So I would say that's where it starts. And also that personal self-care, because we are busy. I mean, we have to live lives with the extra weight and the oppression of racism. And for us as women, sexism, it's a whole lot of work. We get tired, and understand that, and not categorize it as we're angry people because we're people of color. Yes, we're angry. If you were oppressed, you would be angry too, if you are oppressed. And if we aren't angry, then we may not recognize our worth. If we're too accepting of it, we lose our worth. And that's a type of soul death that Dr. Kenneth Hardy talks about.
Thank you. That was a very, very impressive responses from both of you, and a lot of food for thought. And thank you, Akia, for putting the link in the chat for people who would like to hear more or learn more about the 1619 project. To Congresswoman Joanna Hayes' point, let's not the election be the end of the conversation. So this election did not completely repudiate racism as we hoped for. Where do we go from here? April.
Okay. I think where we go from here is that we don't stop here. Akia, as you said, what the COVID-19 crisis did was pull the veil back from what was happening. These things were happening in the Obama administration. Michael Brown died under police brutality. They were happening before the Obama administration. The fact that we are having still firsts for African Americans, and slavery was 155 years ago, emancipation was 155 years ago. We need to continue because it doesn't stop. I think some of us, and I want to blame it on a generation before me, but I'll take some responsibility. When we made so many achievements in the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement and in the 70s, thought, oh, wow, it would stay. It doesn't stay. It doesn't stay. We have to keep it. It is precious. It's like a plant is like any living thing. You have to continue to nurture it. So it doesn't stop. It didn't start with 45. It's not going to end with 45, but we can continue to have it end as we go further and continue to hold this administration accountable, as Congresswoman Hayes said. I am very happy that this administration is including many people of color, and I'm very happy that Senator Kamala Harris is now Vice President-elect Kamala Harris and will be Vice President Kamala Harris. But just like we needed to hold President Barack Obama to the fire, we need to hold her and all, and to really say it's not just, as you were saying, diversity or numbers. It's about real incremental institutional internalized change.
I agree. I think also like noting when at the Image Awards this earlier this year in February, Rihanna was there and she accepted an award, and she was talking about like when you're marching and protesting and talking about the Michael Brown Jr.'s and the Atiana Jeffersons of the world, tell your friends to pull up. So I'm encouraging y'all to hold people accountable. It's not only the vice president and the president that we have voted for in this past election. We also voted for our congresswomen as well as our state senators in the legislature for Connecticut. And there's bills that's going to be going to the LOB up in 2021 year. That affects you. Last year in 2019, we actually were talking about period poverty and how that shows up and manifests in schools. And knowing that I'm a woman and I was able, and I went through that when my first time, I was like, oh my God, like Mom, I'm scared. But knowing that people might not have access to sanitary products, like that was something that I wanted to fight for, right? That's a health equity issue. And that doesn't only go across race lines, but it's across gender lines as well. So having those conversations, I think also, before you all were able to come on, I was saying that civic engagement is not limited only to the election season. I think oftentimes people don't realize that Board of Education seats are also elected seats most times in a lot of your municipalities. So show up to that Board of Education meeting, make sure that you hold people accountable in those positions as well. They are the ones that are making the laws and the legislations and the rules and the policies about whether your skirt is too short or too long, or whether or not you're able to come to school on time, what times you guys come, whether or not there's a bus that's supposed to be there, how the teacher implements the newly passed legislation on Black and Puerto Rican studies to be implemented in schools. Like all that stuff is important, right? And I think we elect people and we hold them accountable, because at the end of the day, we are electing them by our votes, and our votes are the ones that put them in there and can also take them out. So recognize that part. I think also, what do you like? Find your passion projects. What drives you? When I started in activism when I was 16 years old, the reason why I got started was because Trayvon Martin was killed. And I recognized and I saw that Trayvon Martin could have been my father. He could have been my track team brothers that I was running track with. He could have been any male, but he also could have been me. Trayvon was only 2 years older than me. And having those conversations and how that showed up and how that manifested as well, where I'm like, you know what? I have the power to make change. I have the power to now become a legislative aide or an intern at Lori Cumbo's office and try to talk about discretionary funding and making sure that comes to my school. I have the power to now have those conversations with my church community and ask them like, what's going on the ground, and why is it important for us to now bring those conversations to our legislators? Because at the end of the day, once again, we are the ones that put them in place. But also, how do we now show up in our own agency? You all have the power. When I came into Connecticut in 2015, I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I founded the Black Student Union at Post University, and it was intentional, right? At first, I was like, you know what, I need to find the Black Student Union because, you know, I need people to just be around me and be in community. But I realized that was a space for other people to also be in community, but also learn about our ancestry and our history. And I'll always go back to the fact that education is very important, and for you to all, so one, find your passion projects and do some more inner work and shadow work on your own selves, but also share that with your community. You never know what your homegirl might need.
Thank you, Akia. That was excellent. And thank you, April. We just would like to ask a quick poll to our participants and get back to our conversation.
Can someone confirm that you see it on the screen?
Yes.
Yes, I did see
great.
it. Did you get the answer?
Chelsea, when the results are ready, you can share them with everyone.
Exactly.
Okay, I don't see that any are polled just yet, added in.
We can get back to it. Maybe we continue. So how do you understand the racial dynamic in America right now? And how does one navigate it? Akia, you want to start us?
Sure. So the question was, how do I understand
How do you understand the racial dynamic and how to navigate the racial dynamic in America right now?
Are you talking about like a black and white divide? Or are you talking about
Black, white, Latino white, or Latinx white? There is a tension when it comes to racial conversation in America, and it is for sure more Black dominated right now. So how does a non-white person navigate that dynamic?
Well, I'm not white, so I can't speak from that perspective. But I think
from our point of view,
from a black person point of view, okay, so I can do that. I mean, I think show up unapologetically. I am a firm believer in speaking in my truth. And I see that my auntie Taj is on, so I'm going to highlight her as well. Who used to work for Post University as the head coach for the basketball team. So I frequently remember having those conversations on how to unapologetically walk in my truth and also like be held accountable too. I think there is, you don't walk or expect that you can't be wrong. And people will also be able to challenge your thoughts, but also like humbly and gracefully push back as well, right? Like if somebody's saying, Kia, like, I don't think that, you know, Black girls belong in tech, it's like, oh, but I'm here. So what were you about to do about that? So I guess for me, the conversation once again goes back to the first question that you asked me about how do we now have these how do we move towards racial healing? And racial healing really starts with self-work. So if you're confident and you're walking in a spirit of confidence of yourself, then you really don't have to refute or rebut against other people's thoughts and ideologies, because you will be so confident in the space that you're in, because once again, those were built for you, that you no longer have to have those conversations.
April?
Thank you. I think what I understand is that where we are now, we are at a point, and it's slightly overused word, but I think it's overused for a reason, of racial reckoning. And reckoning is actually about seeing, understanding, and addressing what's happened. And I like that you asked the question about people of color, BIPOC community, because one of the things that in America racism does, it puts up white supremacy. So white has the power. White people, systems are designed to afford white people more power, privilege, and opportunities. And to maintain that system, you have to have a buffer. And so oftentimes, other people of color are not afforded full white privilege or power or status, but they are afforded some. And we all want to have proximity to power. We want to have as much power as we can. Mm-hmm. But the other part of the dynamic of racism in this country is that it's the anti-Black racism, because it was the anti-Black racism that was used to justify slavery and capitalism. And it is, if you think of it, it's the other side, the other bookend to racism. And so often for people of color who are not identified as Black, it's a difficult place to be, because you have access to power and privilege of Black people, and you're also socialized to not like Black people because of the anti-Black racism, and yet they suffer racism, and white people pay a price for racism as well as privileges. So I think part of it is to understand why there is a racial divide, why are there these tensions, and what it is supporting, and that it is more than just interpersonal interaction. It plays out in the interpersonal, but it's more than that. And then the other part, I believe, is about the healing. And we have to heal individually from the impact of this really noxious system. And sometimes we don't even recognize how much, particularly as people of color, and particularly Black people, we have absorbed so many negative messages about ourselves that even when we put on and take on positivity, it can creep up. And so to be in community with one another, to learn how to love ourselves and each other, to understand what has happened to us. So when our behaviors are not appropriate for building community, how do we bring people in rather than and strengthen our community, and to speak our truth, as you were saying. Because if we don't speak our truth, we do suffer a kind of soul death. And that's how we navigate. And for white people to understand the history, it's about history and reading. I often run across white people who don't know basic history. And you ask them something about Reconstruction or slavery, they're like, huh? I know it happened. So really understand the history so that you can effectively make change and not think change is an act of charity or an act of goodness, but that you really are restructuring our society to become a more just and more perfect union.
Well, thank you very much. Before we go to our final question, before we open up for question from the audience, I wanted to quickly go through the result of the first poll. And it looks like education seems to be the key element here, but I also love the fact that so many people are willing to get involved with an organization, and so that's very encouraging for us all. The last question before we open up to questions, it will be, what are you hopeful for when it comes to addressing racism in America for the next administration?
So I guess I'll go. So I am hopeful for the fact that this generation and the generation after mine are really intentional on the spaces that they're taking up, and also thinking about how those who protested and were activists on the ground helped shape legislation. Like, we're talking about the no knock warrant because of Breonna Taylor. We're talking about all these different things that has transpired. So I'm really, really happy about the chain of command or the agency that we're all taking up in spaces. I'm also really excited about, once again, like, hoping that people channel into their passion projects. There's been so many folks that talk about like how they're in places that they're not happy about, they're leaving, and like, okay, like they left and now are chasing their passion. I think ultimately when you start to center your passion and the joy that you have, things start to change around for the better. And when we're talking about racial healing and racial equity, doing that self-healing work, going to Undoing Racism class, that might either be the introductory session for 2 days or go through the whole thing for 5 days. Read those books by Between the World and Me by Takashi Coates is a good book as well. So like, pick up some books and maybe go through like the full gamut of understanding. Yep, I have that. But I'm looking now. I'm like looking at my library, like, oh, like I have books I'm gonna have to like come back and go through, guys. But I think when you think
that one too, excellent.
I got that book in 2015. I was a freshman at Post when I first got that book. But I'm even thinking about like the movie just came out. The Hate You Give. Oh yeah, the movie for Takashi Coates just came out. I actually watched it on HBO. I binge watched it. But The Hate You Give, right? Like The Hate You Give has a whole bunch of things and motifs and information that you might be able to pick up and then pull apart. Hang out with your girls and talk about, like, we just read the first chapter, and now, you know, like, what do you feel during that time period? And how do we now like do some research? Decolonizing Education, My Reflection Matters is another organization that you probably should tap into. Waterbury Bridge to Success Community Partnerships, we just released a book or a guide, family guide, that was commissioned by us, but written by Tremaine Morales James, our equity coach, on Let's Talk About Race, is a family guide of all ages. You can read it as well. And it talks about tips and strategies on how to dismantle racism. And I'm looking forward to, you know, I love having these conversations, but I also like action. So like, what's that next step is going to be, right? Like, are you going to commit yourself to join an organization like the NAACP, who's been around for 111 years, and has been committed to this work for a long period of time and actually knows what they're talking about, right? Are you committed to starting your own organization and getting folks on the ground to help move the needle around equity and justice within your communities? Are you going to hold your family members accountable when it comes to Christmas time, right? Like, you might have that racist uncle, that racist auntie that want to talk about how Black people can't do this and can't do that. Are you going to talk about, like, push back on them and say, well, no, actually they can? And I think, April, when you first started out and you talked about the isms that might affect you, I know wholeheartedly the isms that impact my life. I have to go through racism, sexism, as well as ageism, because I'm most likely one of the youngest executives within some of the agencies that I'm in. But that's okay, right? Like, once again, that spirit of confidence is going to have you step into those roles, because at the end of the day, these roles and positions were made for you anyway. So I'm really excited to see how much space you all take up, and hopefully you're able to find your passion projects and drive home what you see for a better future.
Well, thank you. April,
Yes.
April, can you hold up that
Yes.
book one more time, please?
Oh, sure. And I have to say, we were talking before we got on, saying what resources. So I ran real quick to get a stack. So I don't want to make it look, I didn't outdo any of my sisters here. They gave me the inspiration. And I knew where to find it.
Exactly. We will have another list out there.
This is a collective effort.
We did put the title in the chat, and other people have shared other book recommendations for those interested in learning and reading more.
Yeah, The Water Dancer was also an excellent one by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Invisible No More, Me and White Supremacy, Layla Saad. So that was also excellent. Yeah, there is a lot of material out there if you want to learn.
And shout out a couple of my sisters. The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, who also has written her newest is Cast, which is really important. And I want to find. And one I'm working on right now, White Rage by Carol Anderson.
I have White Rage. I haven't started reading it yet.
I'm working on it now.
But
there is a lot, and there is a lot of this that our people have been studying for since we've been on this continent. I mean, we can go back to many of Carter G. Woodson and W.E.B. Du Bois and so many people we've been studying. I've even been sort of a Walter Rodney. So my hope, and I'll keep it short because so many hopes, but my hope is that we can talk across generations, and that we who are older with experience can share that experience, and we who are younger with the energy and the creativity can pull that together and not be divided. Because one of the things that so often is that we're divided across the generations, and there's a fight, an intergenerational fight. And we survived this long because we supported and treasured our youth, and we respected and revered our elders, and we always remembered our ancestors. So remember whose shoulders you're standing on, and prepare yourself to have someone stand on your shoulders. And that can happen at any age.
Well, thank you. This was very, very interesting, very eye-opening, and I'm looking forward to the question from the audience. And in the meantime, one of the first question will be to what can one do concretely in the community? Akia, you did mention joining an organization, starting an organization, joining a historical organization like the NAACP. But on the daily level, what can one do concretely after this Zoom, for example?
So you could also follow some of the organizations. Well, I think like when COVID first hit and everybody was going outside and protesting, I was like, I'm upset at the fact that we have to go outside and protest in the midst of a global pandemic. And because I've been doing this since I was like 14 years old, I chose not to at the beginning. So I donated money to a lot of these organizations that were doing the groundwork, but also grounding myself, like going back and preparing. And I'm always go back to the education part, because you can't go outside unless you know what you're doing. That's really important for you to note and recognize, because there are certain like tips and strategies or techniques that they utilize, like clergy walk on the outside and people walk on the inside. That was something that was used during the 60s, right? Like there's strategies that are utilizing, unless you read and like talk to an OG or talk to somebody that is your I don't want to say superior, but somebody that's your elder, you wouldn't know those things. So like making sure that you ground yourself in truth, but also become an active learner. And being an active learner and also incorporates doing that, reaching out to other organizations and volunteering your time. So it might not necessarily look like something that specifically has to be named as racial equity. It could be doing a food drive, right? Like it literally could be as simple as that. It could be collecting socks, gloves, and hats because it's getting cold outside, and like we know that a lot of homeless people are outside, or people that are less fortunate. But when it starts from your passion project, I feel like I've been talking about this, but I'm going to continue to like drive it back home for you guys to understand, because it's so important. I think knowing that the NAACP has 6 game changers, and we are the only intergenerational organization of its kind, especially when we focus on civil rights and education. It is so important for you to understand where you lie. Like if I am interested in education and I don't see the intersectionality between education and health, then I'm not going to do anything around health. So if I directly align with education, or I directly align with civic engagement, or I directly align with criminal justice, that's what's going to drive me. So finding those drivers so that you now can seek those other opportunities that might put you in a different place or predicament within your individual community.
All right. Well, thank you, ladies. We have only 10 minutes left. So
Fatou,
Chelsea,
this is Chelsea.
Yes.
I quickly wanted to jump in. One, I have an anonymous question that was sent to us that I want to ask Akia.
Thank you.
And the second thing, I just want to encourage anyone who's on this meeting, if you can use the raise your hand feature, or you can ask your question in the chat. We just want to hear from you, and we want to make sure you get heard. So with that, Akia, the question is, can non-people of color join the NAACP?
Of course. If you know the history or the genesis of the NAACP, the NAACP was actually founded by people on both sides. So yeah, you can join the NAACP. It's not limited to race. That would be actually illegal. So you are all set.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Kelly, you had a quick explanation to give? Kelly Taylor?
Me? Oh, well, I'm also an NAACP president at my college, and me and Keela were very close. She's amazing. Ladies, definitely take advantage, get to know her, as well as NAACP. It's a great organization. I know for myself, I had to learn my history about it. What person asks, do you have to be a person of color to join NAACP? No, you do not. Like Keela said, the history, if you know the history of NAACP, you will know that it's many races that helped the NAACP. So do some research, take this as a learning and educational value. That's what Miss April and Akia has been saying this all along, is educate yourself. I know I've been jotting down some, like the 1619, I've been jotting down like different books I need to read up on. So take advantage of this. This is a great learning event.
I will also note about the 1619 project. I had the privilege of actually interviewing or doing a fireside chat with Nicole Hannah-Jones in September. So she's really, really cool. I think I had the transcript from that. So if anything, I can send it out to the LiveGirl team so you guys could read a little bit more. Yep, it is a podcast. Yep, it's good. It's definitely, it's really, really good. But she went through the intricacies of why she was able to do her research and talk about the foundation that was laid for this country, which was on the backs of Black people. Like, we have to now own our history and be okay with that. And even with the idea of how we are now implementing African American and Latinx history in schools, in public schools in the state of Connecticut, like who's writing that curriculum? And then are they actually telling the correct history? I joke about this all the time about the fact that, you know, we could talk about taking out Columbus statues all across the state or across the country. We could talk about paying Black Lives Matter down the street, but if you're not doing anything internally around policy, then you're really not doing anything. It's pretty much pointless. So once again, find your passion projects, find what drives you, find what ask your community what they need instead of prescribing things to them. I oftentimes see also that leaders take up the opportunity to prescribe. Like, I know the key answers. Like, do you ask somebody if that's what they needed? Do you ask them if they needed food as opposed to cash assistance? Like, ask those questions, those critical questions, so you can bring them back to your legislators and have those conversations.
Excellent. Well, we can keep this conversation going for hours and hours and hours, but we sadly have to stop. And before our time comes to an end, I would love for April to lead us into a grounding exercise.
And real quick, we do have one raised hand by Emma Mackey.
Oh, we do? Sorry.
Yeah, before we move on. Thank you.
Sorry, just have to ask one more thing. So thank you all for being here today. It really means a lot for LiveGirl and all of us watching. I work with a lot of younger girls doing like confidence clubs with LiveGirl, and I always try to emphasize how important it is to talk about like uncomfortable topics. And if you have any advice that you want to share, like a last thought that I can share with them, because I work with just a bunch of groups too, of like how as a white woman too to, I guess, discuss these topics as well to them.
I would say, and this is really trying to condense a lot of the work I do that I've done over a 6-week thing, into first understanding your discomfort, where it is, and then recognizing that race is not the problem of the person of color. Race is a problem of all of us in society, and how can you talk about it from your perspective, not so much as getting their perspective. When you can say, I, as you know, a white woman, realized these things or didn't realize these things, that can open up a conversation rather than what is it like for you to be Black, Latinx, Indigenous, what have you, because then it's about them educating you and not sharing. So coming from that. And also being able to say, I'm willing to have this uncomfortable conversation, and it's going to be an unfinished conversation. It's going to continue.
Yeah. Totally.
So on that, this work can hit us in many different ways. So one of the things I like to encourage people to do is about taking care of yourself. And I connect to whose shoulders we stand on, and I connect it to the traditions where breath represents energy, life, and ancestors. So I want us to just take some cleansing breaths. So first, feel where your feet are, feel where you're sitting, notice where your body is. If you want to close your eyes, you can keep them open. And I want you to breathe in through your nose and breathe out through your mouth. And I'm looking to see, and I'm going to use a tradition that comes from the East. This is a singing bowl. So when I hit it once, you're going to breathe in, and hit it again, you're going to hold the breath. And when I hit it a third time, you're going to breathe out. And we're going to do two of those breaths. And at the end, I want you to think of someone you think of as an ancestor. And it could be anybody, living, not living, someone you've met, someone you've heard of in history, and just say their name out loud. So I'm going to talk you through it. So the first, prepare, breathe in. Hold. Breathe out through your mouth. Breathe in. Hold. Breathe out through your mouth. And now I want you to breathe in, and when you breathe out, speak the name of an ancestor. My ancestor will be my grandmother. So breathe in, speak out. Minnie B. Brooks.
Bye-bye, Sumaru.
And we can connect with that spirit, that energy that has brought us thus far, and that will help us go further on. I thank you for your time today.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, April, for guiding us into this quick meditation. And we are looking forward to our next partnership event with LiveGirl. And you all are an impressive group of young ladies, and very proud of you all and participating with LiveGirl. Thank you, Sheri, for giving us the opportunity to be together.
Thank you.
Grateful to partner with you, Fatou. Thank you.
Bye,
It was
everyone.
an
Have a nice
honor to be
evening.
here with you guys. I'll talk to you all soon. I dropped all my contact information in there. Feel free to contact me if you need to. Looking forward to connecting with you guys again afterwards.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Bye.
Thank you so much.